If there's one thing we all share, it's that our lives are all unique. No two of us are exactly alike. That's why Raymond James Financial Advisors get to know you, your family, the challenges you face, and the dreams that inspire you. The things that make your life like no other. Only then do they tailor solutions for what's most important to you. Solutions that pull together the vast resources of a highly respected firm. A firm as unique as the people we serve, that embraces a spirit of independence. A spirit we share with the advisors who choose to partner with us, and with the clients who choose to work with our advisors. Because our focus is on helping you live your life. That's life well planned.
On behalf of the fine folks who give voluntarily of their time, talents, and expertise in caring for this resplendent place.
On behalf of those who have gone before us, but have not been forgotten.
On behalf of the storytellers who are sharing the history of Memphis and of Elmwood with young and old alike.
On behalf of the trustees and lot owners of the cemetery.
On behalf of those who work to maintain Elmwood's 80 acres.
On behalf of the gardeners who bring beauty to the cemetery.
On behalf of the people who keep you safe and sound.
On behalf of the staff, which is here to protect the archives and help you anytime.
Welcome to the soul of the city. Welcome to Elmwood Cemetery.
My name is Scott Perrick, and I'm with Crone Memorials, and we're proud again to be a sponsor of the Elmwood Cemetery Soul of the City film. We're actually located on the other side of the bridge before you enter into Elmwood. We're proud of our long relationship with Elmwood, and we also are proud of the products we provide, both with the high grade of granite and also our outstanding craftsmanship.
Hi, I'm Kevin Williams with Crone Memorials. We're proud of celebrating almost 100 years of providing families with top quality monuments and our relationship with Elmwood Cemetery. We're also proud sponsors of the Soul of the City film.
We at Crone Memorials welcome the opportunity to serve you, so please come in and join us anytime.
Please enjoy the film.
When it gets late in the evening, just before the birds fly up to roost, there's a feeling in the air here at Elmwood. It's not exactly sad, but it's not quite happy either. It's the knowing that another day has passed, that the world kept turning, that babies were born, and that some of us lived our last day here on earth. It's the story we all have in common, and it's more than just some numbers on the stone that marks our resting place. It's the in-between time when we were young and vibrant, when we made our mark on this world. Some of us maybe talked a little louder, walked a little taller, or craved the attention of our fellows. Or maybe some of us were even a little bossy. Why, I know I've been called the boss, both adoringly and with some amount of derision or mockery. But I don't take all that seriously. After all, somebody has to be the boss, don't they? My name is Edward Hull Crump, and I was many things in Memphis during my time here. I was a city commissioner, then the mayor several times. I was a United States congressman, and I guess you could say the boss. Today I'm going to introduce you to some of the most interesting people you've never met. Remarkable people who did great things, ordinary people who made their mark in other ways. But all were equal here at Elmwood. So let's get started. I believe we shall hear from Mr. Stewart first, and he'll be followed by someone you'll really enjoy getting to know, Hazel Jackson Lee.
Good evening. Welcome to Elmwood. When the cemetery was founded, it was out in the country by almost 3 miles and situated that way quite purposefully. Just getting to Elmwood could be quite the challenge back then. But the men who started Elmwood wanted a quiet, peaceful atmosphere, away from the hustle and bustle of city life. They wanted to do away with all the old boneyards that were reservoirs for disease and hiding places for ne'er-do-wells and pardon me, I'm starting to ramble. My name is James Stewart, and I'm honored to have you here tonight. I was the first superintendent of Elmwood. I guess you could say I was the original architect of this cemetery. My wife Jenny and I lived right here with our children on these grounds. I was born in 1826 in Scotland, where I trained as a nurseryman. I emigrated to America after answering a classified ad placed by the proprietors of Elmwood. I brought a wife, 3 sons and a daughter with me. This place would be my finest achievement, and I tell that to people long after I had left here to seek employment elsewhere. The first time I saw Elmwood, it was still a forest, dense, thick, filled with mosquitoes, and bisected by a tiny stream. There, brush and trees were growing in every place a living thing could grow. Given half a chance, I believed I could grow just about anything in Memphis if it just wasn't for this oppressive, stifling heat. The men who hired me, among them Senator Tarley and Davidson Leatherman, wanted a garden-style cemetery. Of course, I was familiar with the style. It incorporated trees both large and small, flowery ones, roses, azaleas, and that sort of thing. I was also to lay out the walks and drives and show the grounds to customers to sell property. For this, I was awarded the handsome sum of $200 per year. I used to be on call at all times, though, except I was allowed to go to church on Sunday and to the bank on Monday. Also, as part of my compensation, I was given a house to live in and a horse to use. Well, the early days of the cemetery were spent cutting down scraggly trees and laying out the roads and lots of various shapes and sizes. I used the natural curves found in the forest to create trails that would later become carriage paths. I determined which trees would be cut, which trees would be kept. That leads me to the name Elmwood. Well, the men who founded Elmwood chose the name for the cemetery by drawing names out of a hat. They hadn't noticed that no elm trees were growing here. So I ordered some elm trees from New York and planted them. I also planted some of the oldest trees still alive in the cemetery today. The Atlas cedar from Morocco in the Miller section, and the gigantic tulip poplar in the Chapel Hill section. Oh, and for interest in color, I bordered the cemetery with a hedge of orange osage trees, which I later pruned into bushes. You won't hear me brag about all the hard work I put in here at Elmwood, but I can't help but be sentimental about this place. It's the one thing I would be remembered most for by future generations. I left Elmwood to start the Elmwood Nursery on Pigeon Roost Road. I believe you people call it Lamar Avenue now. And at my funeral, the president of Elmwood, Joseph Lino, proclaimed, "The Scotchman has fallen." I was lovingly regarded in a long eulogy that credited me for creating the lay of this hallowed land that you're visiting tonight. So, as you begin your journey through the cemetery, please make sure and observe some of my rules. Each lot owner will be given a ticket for his or her family. Tickets must be shown and are not transferable. Persons on horseback or in carriages will be not allowed to leave the carriage paths or to pass through the grounds at a rate exceeding 3 miles per hour. Persons with firearms will not be admitted. Discharging firearms is prohibited in and around the cemetery at a distance of 100 yards. Lastly, all well-disposed persons will confer a favor by informing the superintendent of any breach of the rules that may come under their notice. You're about to meet some of the most interesting people buried here at Elmwood, so have fun. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy your stay.
Did you know that Elmwood Cemetery is home to veterans from all American wars, dating back to the American Revolution? I come from a long line of Army veterans. My grandmother's brother fought in the Spanish-American War, and my uncle was in the Army before World War II. 3 of my brothers served in the Army, and my brother Warren was smack dab in the middle of the Battle of the Bulge. Is it any wonder why I wanted to go into the Army? My name is Hazel Jackson Lee. Women had served as nurses in the Army since the Spanish-American War. They weren't officially a part of the Army, so they did not receive the same benefits as male veterans. But with the threat of World War once again hanging over our heads, every able-bodied man was needed for combat, and women would have to support the critical war efforts. The Women's Army Auxiliary Corps was established in May 1942. With the goal of freeing the men up for the front lines, the Army set an initial recruitment goal of 25,000 women in the first year, but topped that goal in just 6 months. Applicants had to be U.S. citizens and between the ages of 21 and 45, with no dependents. I was 25 and not married at the time, so I figured I'd join. The Army sent me first to Fort Devers in Massachusetts. It was a normal Army camp. We lived in the barracks and had to drill every day. We pitched tents and cooked outdoors and pulled KP duty. Army life took some adjusting. I didn't know what it meant to fall out on the double. At first, whenever they said that, I'd be reaching for one of the other women. Initially, women served as file clerks and typists and stenographers or drivers. But as the war dragged on, it became necessary to train us to perform other jobs. The Army Air Force obtained 40% of enlisted females. These women were trained as weather forecasters and radio operators and control tower operators. A few lucky girls were assigned to flight duty as mechanics or photographers. Women assigned to the Army Services Forces mixed gunpowder and loaded shells and worked as electricians. Now, the American public was skeptical about women in the military. Letters from enlisted men contained a great deal of criticism about the WACs they served with. Many questioned the morality of women who were attracted to military service. A vicious rumor started that 90% of WACs were prostitutes. General Douglas MacArthur would later praise the women under his command, calling them his best soldiers because they worked harder, complained less, and were better disciplined. The first WACs were sent overseas in July of 1943. Overseas positions were highly coveted, but limited to white females. The Army sent me to Camp Goober in Oklahoma. I was assigned to the detachment staff for food services, and it was my job to make sure the women working off base received 3 meals a day. Camp Goober closed after VE Day in 1945, and we were given the opportunity to live a civilian life. I chose to go back to Memphis and marry my boyfriend, Arnett Lee. He sold insurance, while I attended Lemoyne Owen and got a degree in social work. Following my retirement from the Department of Human Services, I traveled the world. I finally visited Europe, Africa, and the Caribbean until my death in 2003. Ultimately, more than 150,000 women would serve as WACs in World War II, paving a way for the Women's Army Corps to become a permanent part of the Army in 1948. We helped loosen the traditional restrictions of female employment and change the way women were viewed in American society. I am proud to have played my part and to have served my country.
Elmwood is known to do strange things to people. It's a fact. Well, I could tell you many, many stories of strange coincidences and random meetings and fate putting unlikely people together, like it was all meant to be. We call it, affectionately, the Elmwood effect. This next story fits perfectly in that category. I'll let Tommy share his story of little Claude Pugh, and after that, you'll meet Ruth Martin, one of the founders of our cradle gardening program.
Hello, I'm Tommy Wilson, a volunteer and a property owner here at Elmwood. Today, I'd like to take you back to 1876. A fountain has been installed in Court Square in downtown Memphis. It was named the Hebe Fountain, after the Greek goddess Hebe, whose statue stood above the fountain. At that time, the pool of the fountain was about 6 feet deep, and it was stocked with catfish and turtles, and there was no fencing around the fountain. On August 26, 1884, a 10-year-old boy named Claude Pugh was sitting at the edge of the fountain, playing with his toy boat in the water. He was described as a newsboy, small for his age, and the only son of a widow woman. Well, somehow Claude slipped into the fountain, and he was unable to climb back up the slick, algae-covered walls. Now, there were several people in the square that day, but no one made any attempt to help the struggling boy. Finally, a fireman arrived and got Claude out of the fountain, but it was too late. Young Claude had drowned. He was brought to Elmwood Cemetery, where he was buried in a public lot. His grave remained unmarked for 135 years. Well, my wife and I heard that story, and we felt like his grave needed to be marked. So with guidance from Elmwood staff and Crone Memorials, we purchased a marker for his gravesite. Now, there are many magnificent monuments here at Elmwood, and each one has a story to tell. But there are also many unmarked graves, and they too have a story to tell. I would encourage you to discover one of these unmarked stories. And if you can, purchase a marker for that gravesite. That way, their story will never, never be forgotten. And if you happen to be downtown in Court Square and you see an apparition of a young boy at the fountain, don't be alarmed. It's just Claude playing with his boat.
My name is Ruth Martin, and I'm a volunteer here at Elmwood. I started to volunteer about 6 years ago. A friend of mine knew how much I loved Elmwood and Memphis history, and he thought this would be a great opportunity for me, and it has been a perfect fit. I started here leading tours for school groups and garden clubs and families. Then I started to do some tree tours and served on the watering tree committee, the watering committee. And then it was 2018 when one of the Elmwood staff asked me if I would be interested in helping them with a pilot, a trial garden program that really included the ornamental cradles style monuments here. I was very excited about that. Elmwood has hundreds of the cradles, and they were established by the family members in the 1800s to be a personal garden on top of the graves of their loved ones. And we might call them planters today. I immediately reached out to two of my Master Gardener friends, and they were excited and ready to get on board. We soon met with the staff at Elmwood and we started to plan the trial. We realized as gardeners that we were going to be the ones responsible for the supplies, the soil, the amendments, and the plants. And then we realized that we had to actually bring the water to the graves since Elmwood has no irrigation. We, the three of us, worked tirelessly getting our cradles ready to plant. We were each assigned two, and there was one adjacent to mine, and I asked if I could just include that third one, and they let me do that. And then at summer's end, I had planted all the cradles in my family plot. So fall was approaching, and we had a little time to sit back and reflect on what we had done, our spring and summer planting. Some things went well, others not so much, but we learned a lot. We were hopeful that the Elmwood would see it like we did, that we had done a pretty good job, and that they would include other people in the trial. So we, like I said, it was fall, and it was time to replant, and I selected for all of my cradles yellow pansies. It was the spring of 2019 when a beloved family member passed away and was to be buried in the family plot that I was tending. Well, it was a rainy Saturday, and I knew that the service was in 2 days, and I had to come to Elmwood to tidy up the cradles. I pulled the weeds and discarded the dead flowers, and I stepped back to look, and the yellow pansies were so beautiful, it looked like a beautiful ray of sunshine on that cloudy day. And I thought, what a happy homecoming for someone who was so loved and that loved Elmwood so much. And that was a day that I was so proud to be a cradle gardener. The friends that I have made on this team, I feel like we all think a lot alike. As we tend our cradles, we share a lot of love for the families and a lot of respect for them and for the loved ones that rest here. I think that for me, cradle gardening has just been a labor of love. I encourage all of you to drive through the cemetery and just take a look at the beautiful statues, the trees, the winding trails, paths, and pay special attention to the cradles, because who knows, you might decide you want to be a cradle gardener. And we are 70 strong on our team now, and we would love to add you to the team. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rachel Oakes. HHM CPAs is proud to provide accounting services for Elmwood Cemetery and to sponsor the Soul of the City virtual film premiere. We hope you enjoy the show.
My name is Roberta Church, and I want everyone to know my family's story and the stories of African American families in Memphis, stories that were largely left out of the history book. Behind me is my family's mausoleum. My grandfather came a long way in his life. He was born enslaved and became a millionaire, the first African American millionaire in the South. He started out as a cabin boy, working on Mississippi riverboats, and then came to Memphis. He eventually owned and operated a hotel, a saloon, and the largest African American auditorium in the U.S., called Churches Park and Auditorium. It was built back when Black people weren't allowed in public parks and auditoriums. That magnificent auditorium is gone now, but Churches Park is still there. Have you ever been to it? It's on Beale Street, east of the FedEx Forum. He also founded the first Black-owned bank in Memphis, the Solvent Savings Bank and Trust Company. He was pretty amazing, a man of firsts. My father, Robert Church Jr., became an important political leader for 40 years. He believed that the ballot was key for African Americans to gain influence in a democracy, and in 1916, he founded the Lincoln League. The League campaigned to educate and register thousands of voters for the first time, in spite of poll taxes and other tactics that tried to prevent them from voting. He organized the NAACP in Memphis in 1917 and served as delegate to 8 Republican national conventions. He inspired me toward a career in politics, although it was never my intention to become a politician. See, I majored in social services and psychology at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and became a social worker shortly after graduation. However, in 1953, while my father was running for Republican committeeman, he died before he was elected. I took his place on the ballot, and I won. That made me the first Black woman in Memphis to run for and win political office. I did it as my obligation and as a tribute to my father. That election also made me the first Black woman to be elected to the Republican State Executive Committee in Tennessee. I was well on my way to a career in politics. In 1953, I was appointed by the Eisenhower administration to the Department of Labor as a minority groups consultant to promote equal employment opportunities. In 1963, I moved to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, overseeing joint federal and state programs. In 1970, I was appointed by President Richard Nixon to the President's Advisory Council in Adult Education, and served 2 terms there. After 29 years in a career in politics, I retired to Memphis in 1982. In 1987, I became the first woman and the first African American to receive the Senior Citizen of the Year Award from the Kiwanis Club in Memphis. I guess you could say I was a woman of first. I love this old cemetery and served on the Elmwood Advisory Committee. I invite you to come back and visit the cottage office. I want you to see the antique oak hall tree from my grandfather's house that I gave to this cemetery. By writing my books, it was my hope that the pioneers of the African American community would be remembered, because what they built through hard work and sacrifice. They were real pioneers, and I was one too. Thank you for coming and visiting me. Be well, friends.
Elmwood Cemetery was founded as part of the rural cemetery movement, which embraced the idea that cemeteries should conform to their landscape. It was meant as a park for the living as well as a resting place for the dead, and it wanted people to come out and enjoy outdoor activity amidst the beautiful garden landscape and the art of the funerary sculptures. When the 50 citizens of Memphis that decided to found the cemetery got together, they needed a name for their new cemetery. They put a bunch of suggestions in the proverbial hat, and they drew out the name Elmwood. Wonderful name, but unfortunately there were no elms planted at Elmwood Cemetery. So they sent off for several elm trees and planted them. It's truly amazing that after so many years, some of those original elm trees are still standing here at Elmwood Cemetery. Samuel Phillips, who was superintendent of the cemetery from 1866 until 1878, is credited with choosing and planting many of the trees which still stand today. For many years, the trees of Elmwood were left to just survive on their own. However, in 1995, the Board of Trustees began an effort to address the care and maintenance of the trees. In 2000, a reforestation project began to expand the collection of trees and maintain the character of Elmwood. Many hardwood trees were planted because they are longer lasting, provide shade, and are representative of the garden cemetery movement. In 1998, the Arboretum was named in honor of Carlisle S. Page. Known as Mr. Elmwood, Mr. Page joined the cemetery's Board of Trustees in 1963 and served for 38 years. During this time, he devoted himself to the expansion of the tree collection, personally planting hundreds of crepe myrtles, dogwoods, and hybrid elms to replace those original elms that were lost to Dutch elm disease. Today, Elmwood has over 1,500 trees, and that encompasses over 90 different species, which makes this a Level 3 Arboretum as certified by the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council. We now offer 2 different tree tours, one in the spring and one in the fall, that I personally give. We also have a map of the Carlisle S. Page Arboretum that's available in the office. We invite you to come out and explore the cemetery that so many generations of Memphians have had a hand in creating.
Join the adventure at the Memphis Zoo through October 31st. More info at memphiszoo.org. Brought to you by Kroger.
If you know some of the stories here at Elmwood, you know that remarkable women have a special place in our hearts. Next, I would like for you to meet Molly Fontaine Taylor, Etta Grigsby Partee, and Lily Mae Glover.
Hello friends, it's lovely to see you today. My name is Molly Fontaine Taylor, and I'm a member of what you might call the Victorian Village Neighborhood Association, although we wouldn't have called it anything like that in our times. I grew up in a home that you might know as the Woodruff Fontaine House. Life was grand for all of us, with days met being awakened by our nurses for breakfast in bed. The children were led in instruction by a private tutor. The boys were, of course, taught early on about things like mathematics, world history, and science, while we girls were refined in the ways of classical literature, poetry, embroidery, singing, and art. Our father educated us, but he was also known for the lavish, legendary entertainments held in our home. Why, my father even held a reception for sitting President Grover Cleveland during his trip to Memphis in 1887. Can you imagine hosting a president in your home? There were flowers everywhere, and a band, and so much food. And the absolute upper crust of Memphis was invited. Over 2,000 guests. Red lanterns lit the lawn. This is what life was like during the Gilded Age. No expenses were spared. Life was to be celebrated with refinement. But more about my father. He was the president of a major cotton firm, the Hill Fontaine Company. It was the third largest in the world at one time. My father doted on me. I was the apple of his eye. And it was no surprise that when I became engaged to Dr. William Taylor, that he bestowed upon me the finest gift of all, our own home, situated right across the street from the house in which I grew up. The wedding took place on Valentine's Day, 1886. Of course, the house had to be presented in concept only, as it wasn't actually started yet. It was finished about 4 years later, and in the meantime, we lived with Mother and Father on the second floor of my childhood home, which I adored. Perhaps it was a bit of a strain on those first few years of marital bliss, but no bother about that. It was completed in 1890. We moved in, and life was grand. I enjoyed a wonderful life on Adams Avenue and the full richness of a life of high society. But the spirit of those extravagant parties lives on in the house that's now a bar and restaurant, named after me, no less. It was a pleasure seeing you today. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. Take care.
On September 22nd, 1904, a volcano erupted in southern Italy, spewing lava in a stream nearly 2,000 feet wide. It devastated the region, swallowing houses in fiery, molten flames and leaving 20,000 people homeless. We'll come back to Italy in just a moment though, because at the same time, on the other side of the planet, I was taking my final breaths of this life. I was dying of Bright's disease, and it was also my wedding day. Now though, I would like to welcome you to this beautiful old Victorian age garden cemetery. I am pleased to meet you and tell you a little bit about myself, although just a little bit is all I will be able to tell you because there wasn't much written about me while I was alive. My name is Etta Grigsby. Excuse me, I mean to say my name is Etta Grigsby Partee. You see, my life as a married lady wasn't long enough for me to have grown accustomed to introducing myself by my husband Hiram's last name. But he's buried with me now. Truly though, this visit is such an honor for me because although my statue's been photographed many times, this is my first time sharing my story. I don't know why. After all, the statue that memorializes me was carved in northern Italy in the town of Carrara, and it's even made of the marble so famously named after that town. Now, Carrara marble is known to be a delicate stone. The slightest contact can cause it to scratch or chip, but that's why my statue was covered with a large glass dome when it was originally installed here at Elmwood, so it would be protected from weather and harm and all worries. Well, as you can imagine, the glass dome broke during a terrible storm. If you ask me, I think it wasn't replaced because there was a Great Depression in this country and the expense was thought unwise at the time. Yet the statue's beauty still remains, regardless of its exposure to the elements. Oh, and look, I wanted to show you this verse. Warm summer sun, shine kindly here. Warm summer wind, blow gently here. Green sod above, lie light, good night, dear heart, good night, good night. Mr. Twain inscribed those words on the tombstone of one of his daughters that predeceased him, and my husband, being deeply in love with me, used those words for me too. How utterly tragic to die on your wedding day. I must admit, I'm not easy discussing it. What a life I missed, and all because of Bright's disease. You have heard of it, yes? No? My, how things have changed in a century's time. Bright's disease is acute kidney disease caused by an untreated streptococcal infection. I am so happy that none of you will likely ever have to endure its wrath upon your bodies. I dearly wish I could say the same about myself. Oh, but it was such a treat to be able to visit with you all, even if only for a moment in time. Time is a most precious gift, so spend yours wisely, friends, and come visit me in person. Adieu. Farewell.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lily Mae Glover. I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, way back in 1906. You may know me by my stage name, Ma Rainey #2. Ma Rainey was a blues singer, and I really liked her style. I was such a big fan of hers that after she died in 1939, I started calling myself Ma Rainey #2. They say the first Ma Rainey was the mother of the blues. Well, guess what? They called me the mother of Bill Street, and that was just fine by me. I love singing the blues, but my family thought it wasn't good music. My father was a pastor and wanted all his children to grow up to be respectable. He thought me singing the blues was a disgrace to the family. After my mother died, I decided to run off and join a traveling medicine show. I was 13 years old. The show was called the Tom Simpson Traveling Medicine Show. They wanted a blues singer, and I wanted to sing. Along the way, they taught me how to tell fortunes. I'd look into a big marble or deal out some cards and tell people if they were going to find love or money. I mostly told them whatever they wanted to hear. Sometimes I'd pretend like I could read minds. I couldn't do any of that stuff though. The only thing I could really do was sing. After I left the traveling show, I came to Memphis. I sang at some of the biggest and best blues clubs on Beale Street. Some of my favorites were the Chicago House and Blue Mondays. I used to sing for 15 cents a week at this place called Hamburger Heaven. A man named B.B. King would play with me. B.B. once told me that he would never make any money singing the blues, so he was gonna quit and try something else. I told him stick with it and he'd make it. And look, just about everybody knows his name. He's even got a club named after him on Beale Street. I married a cook named Willie Glover. We had a good life, but there was never enough money, so I almost always had to work a second job. Show business came first though. It was what I loved doing. Even when my health started failing, I'd still find a way to perform. I might fall asleep on the bandstand waiting on my turn to sing, but those people there, they lift me up. They would always talk to me and kiss me and tell me they came from hither and yon to hear me sing. Woo! It's a wonderful thing to love and be loved. After I passed on in 1985, they had a big service and procession for me down Beale Street. They put me in a horse-drawn carriage and took me all the way from my service at the First Baptist Beale Street to Handy Park. About 1,000 people were there, and the Millionaires and the Blues Alley All-Stars and a bunch of Memphis musicians performed. Well, I'll say this, but don't tell my father. My monument reads, I'm Ma Rainey #2, mother of Beale Street. I'm 78 years old, ain't had enough of nothing, and it's too damn late now. Be well, friends, and thank you for listening to my story.
The National Society of the Colonial Dames of America is an organization dedicated to actively promoting our national heritage in 3 mission areas: historic preservation, patriotic service, and educational projects. As chairwoman of the Memphis Town Committee of National Colonial Dames of America, we were looking for a civic project to work on, and Kim Bearden, Executive Director of Historic Elmwood Cemetery, came to us with a proposal. It was about coming together with a group of flags and flagpoles which would represent major moments in the history of the United States and in Memphis. Our membership enthusiastically responded, and with their gifts we were able to fund not only the flags but the flagpoles and informational plaques for these flags, and now they are installed and known as the Avenue of Flags. I look forward to you coming to see this beautiful Avenue of Flags. You will learn so much about the history of the United States and Memphis, and you will appreciate how much the collaboration of the Memphis Colonial Dames and Elmwood Cemetery have enhanced your visit to historic Elmwood Cemetery.
Hey Taryn, how's it going today?
It's going hot.
Thank you so much for having me out to the tree lot today. Woodland Tree Services tree lot, one of them. And we're here today because we're going to pick a tree to go in front of our chapel.
That's correct. Yeah, just a little background here. I was able to purchase inventory of a tree farm that was over mature. The guy got out of business, 10 acres in Lauderdale County, which is about an hour and a half from here. And so that idea combined with, we've been able to, in very close to our proximity of our business here at Get Well and 240, we've started to buy in tax sales smaller lots that have been abandoned, clean them up and have a smaller carbon footprint in the sense that we're using smaller lots for nurseries to grow trees, and continue to try to get to the point to where we're neutral in the amount of trees we're taking out versus what we're planting. So that's kind of the hopes and dreams, and what I decided would be a great tree is one of these bigger sugar maples here that we could put right in. This is about a 4, maybe close, about a 4-inch caliper sugar maple, this guy right here, that I think would look really good. And we've got a few others in here. That one back there is a little bigger, and there's a few more back there, so we'll figure out which one is gonna be best. This has got some dye back here. So we'll pick out one of these, and as it gets a little bit cooler, we can go ahead and move that down there and get it in and get you set up with something relatively established.
Wow, this is really impressive. I mean, these trees look like they're mature, completely grown, but you're able to move these.
Yeah, we got invested in a 44-inch tree spade, which is the largest spade that we can operate with our largest skid steer. So we still maintain versatility. Also picked up a 6 container pod trailer, so if we're moving from point A to point B with a smaller load, we don't have to bag and burlap them.
Wow.
But otherwise, a lot of these will be bagged and burlapped, and then we try to get them homed in here, take care of them, fertilize them, get them structure pruned, and ultimately we'd like to have people, when they're replacing a tree for whatever reason, they could come in and specifically pick out a tree that may speaks to them or they like the form on it. Very similar to the tree products division, to where people come in and pick a piece of wood and want to make a table or furniture out of. So it's the same theory, more or less.
Sure. So tell me what the benefit is of having chosen a sugar maple for in front of our chapel.
Well, the fall color is so brilliant. And unlike a lot of the other maples, they're not super fast growing. They're more of a medium growing tree, and so they're not nearly as prone to breakage and wind events. And I think ultimately the fall color, especially when replacing a Ginkgo that has brilliant fall color, but has so much litter to it that it becomes obnoxious, this will be just as equally brilliant in the fall.
I agree. I think it's a great choice. I think it's going to make such a dramatic impact right there as people drive over the bridge, especially in the fall. But I've got to say, the shape of the tree is very nice, and I think it's going to be perfect. I think you've chosen very well for us.
And then we'll look to, as we go into the fall and winter, there's a lot of smaller trees that we can get in for you guys, and you know, it's an ongoing thing, so I really look forward to being able to maintain somewhat of a maturing tree canopy. So I feel like this just fits together so good with your philosophy and mine, and really would like to get some programs into the community as well to replant in some of the areas that really don't get the attention that they need. So
absolutely. Well, I think it's brilliant that there's a tree lot in the middle of what is really such a highly trafficked area of town. You would never really know that it was here. But this tree lot does so much good. It's going to provide shade, it's going to provide refuge for all of our critters that we need, and it's going to provide color over time. And
pollinators and bees and all those things. And if for whatever reason we don't move these trees or sell them or place them somewhere, then they grow here and they serve a purpose as well. And eventually this lot may develop into housing, and then we can work around the trees that are here. So the larger industrial scale nurseries and retail outlets are very carbon intensive with moving things around. So you got to try to find a balance to where you're not basically canceling each other out while trying to do a good thing. So we hope we can continue to bring this up like they've done with urban food gardens, and maybe get this going on and make some kind of a scalable program for other people to follow as well.
Fascinating. I'm just so impressed with this.
I appreciate you coming by for sure.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
In the late 1870s, Memphis was in a lot of trouble. Yellow fever had devastated our city. Those who could afford to leave abandoned the city never to return. And those who couldn't leave were faced with disease, chaos, and death. But as happens so many times, out of disaster, the human spirit prevails. I proudly introduce you to Pappy Haddon.
From behind my judge's desk in the police court of the 1880s, I looked down on innumerable knife wielders, pistol packers, razor men, and axe slingers. To bury the hatchet in those days usually meant you buried it in the skull of your opponent. And over the years, I noticed that a lot of these disagreements began with a friendly game of craps. The dice were loaded, I heard a lot. He didn't give me a fair shake. And so I, the Honorable David Park Haddon, who everybody knew as Pappy, invented the Haddon horn. It was about a 9-inch long black funnel, and it allowed any player of craps to throw a fair and friendly game of dice. Soon it was available for sale all over the country through gambling magazines. This enlightened action was typical of my brilliance, and I became one of Memphis' most distinguished citizens. I was lured by the cotton trade to Memphis from New York City after the Civil War. Dapperly dressed, I soon set the pace for Memphis society. In 1872, I organized the first Mardi Gras celebration. I was a charter member of a secret crew called Memphi. I was appointed to the board of the Cosset Public Library in 1876, and in 1879, I was honored to be elected as president of the Memphis Cotton Exchange. I was a lovable landmark of late 19th century Memphis, distinguished in my dress with my starched collar and my pearl tie pin, matching silk gloves and top hat, a gold-tipped walking cane. After those terrible years of the yellow fever epidemics and the city's subsequent bankruptcy, I was honored to serve as president of the taxing district of Shelby County for 8 years while the city got back on its feet. Effectively, I was the town's mayor. I oversaw the draining of stagnant sewerage and swamps, the digging of the first artesian well, the laying of wooden planks on those muddy streets, and the general economic recovery of the city. After they made me judge of the police court, it became popular for people to congregate and watch me perform. I would gavel the court into session and announce, "The show is on." When they dragged one of my own tenants into court for failing to pay rent, I challenged the policeman, "How's he going to pay the rent if you arrest him?" The case is dismissed. I welcomed U.S. President Grover Cleveland to Memphis in 1887 and oversaw the construction of the Harahan Bridge in 1889. I would live to see the dawn of a new century in Memphis. I died in 1903 before more momentous changes would come to the city. There's a street named after me downtown near Butler and Calhoun. I rest here at Elmwood next to my wife. Friends, the court is dismissed.
Hi everyone, my name is Kim Bearden and I'm the Executive Director of Elmwood Cemetery. If you've followed Elmwood on social media or if you receive our emails, then you might have seen the My Elmwood video series, but if not, I'll explain. Under normal circumstances, Elmwood staff and volunteers host dozens of tours, events, and lectures over the course of a year. We have a great time doing it too, connecting with people who teach us by sharing their insights, relationships, and stories about the individuals buried at Elmwood. But, as with all things, we've had to pause most of our events this year. That's when we came up with the My Elmwood video series. We've had a great time hearing from Elmwood family members, supporters, and historians on a wide array of subjects. LaUna Brubaker, Elmwood board president, kicked it off and talked about her personal connection to Elmwood and the comfort she gets from releasing butterflies in the cemetery. Erica Sugarman talked about her mentor and friend, Minerva Jonikin, her life achievements, and how it inspired Erica in her own educational and professional pursuits. Amanda Knight shared a mystery straight out of the history books, the tale of Jasper Newton Smith and his unsolved disappearance in 1899. Elena Williams, former president of the Woodruff Fontaine House, told us about Molly Woodruff's loves and losses and invited us to experience the strange things that happen at the house to this day. The Honorable Tarek Sugarman told us about his father, the Honorable Russell Sugarman, an attorney and judge who devoted his life's work to the civil rights movement, helping to bring much-needed change to our world. Retired Judge Janice Holder spoke about the struggle for women's equality through one woman's fight to become recognized by her peers as a competent, educated, and professional attorney, the first to be licensed in the state of Tennessee, Marion Scudder Griffin. Elmwood trustee Dan Conaway recalled the story of an Episcopal priest, Charles Carroll Parsons, and his incredible sacrifice during the yellow fever epidemic of 1878. A scandalous black market adoption ring, the woman who orchestrated it, and the children who died in her care. The story of the Tennessee Children's Home Society was told by Elmwood volunteer Dale Schaefer. The greatest maritime disaster in the history of the United States took place just 7 miles north of Memphis on the Mississippi River. Elmwood volunteer Tommy Wilson shared the tragic tale of the wreck of the steamer Sultana. Heroes come in all forms. Assistant Director Bob Barnett shared the story of a Madam, Emily Sutton, whose professional name was Fanny Walker, and her act of courage in helping the people of Memphis during the 1873 yellow fever epidemic. World War I's Gold Star mothers are represented here at Elmwood too. Andy Pouncey, Germantown city historian, tells us about Nellie Cockrell and a long-awaited trip to France. Preservationists sometimes go unthanked for the work they do to keep a city's character intact. Memphis Heritage Executive Director Holly Jansen Fulkerson told us about Eleanor Day Hughes and her commitment to preserving our city's historic buildings. Calvin Turley shared with us his newfound love of genealogical research after joining the Board of Trustees. We've covered a lot of subject matters in the My Elmwood video series, and we'll be releasing more videos very soon. If you'd like to watch any of them, you can do so by visiting elmwoodcemetery.org/myelmwood. They're all on our website. And if you've enjoyed what you've seen, please consider making a donation to Elmwood by texting 901-446-1925 with the word GIVE. Follow the prompts and you'll be instructed on how to make a donation to the cemetery. No gift is too small. Thank you for watching, friends. We hope you're enjoying the soul of the city.
We have our share of characters, just like everywhere else. Our final 3 residents run the gamut of the lucky, the famous, and the infamous. I humbly introduce you to Geneva Barnes Ramsey Williams, Ernest Withers, and Alma Theed.
Have y'all ever heard that saying, marry in blue, your husband will be true, marry in white, everything will be all right, but marry in black, you'll want to take the whole thing back? Ain't that ever the truth? I was married wearing a little black dress, and boy did I ever live to regret it. I married a man named Mr. George Barnes, but you may know him better actually by his nickname, which was Machine Gun Kelly. My name is Geneva. I was his first wife, and I'm buried here at historic Elmwood Cemetery. George was handsome. Don't we always love the handsome ones that turn out to be the lying-cheating, double-cross... Well, wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself. He actually was the most notorious criminal of 1930s America during the Prohibition era, when it was illegal to buy and sell alcohol. Well, okay, hold that thought. Anyway, George, the one I knew, was really too lazy to even have planned half the crimes he was ever committed for, and he never did kill anybody. We met at a party the summer of our senior year at Central High School, and it was love at first sight. Unfortunately, George's bad reputation had preceded him. My daddy knew all about him and did not put any stock in that kind of behavior. Daddy had made millions of dollars building levees and railroads all over the South. 2 qualities he always required in somebody were hard work and honesty. Unfortunately, George did not possess either one of those qualities. Daddy tried to split us up by sending me away to finishing school. But the night before I was to leave, George and I took a ride, and I had on a little black dress, and one thing kind of led to another. Got a little carried away, so we got married that same night. That was when I was 17 years old. Well, Daddy wanted me to be happy, so he put George to work for him, and everything was actually pretty good for a while until Daddy got killed in some freak accident lighting a stick of dynamite Well, everything went downhill after that. Mama used the insurance money to set George up in a used car lot selling cars, but that didn't pan out. Then she bought us the cutest little goat farm, not far from Elmwood, but George wouldn't cut out to be a farmer, so he turned to doing what he did best, which was sell illegal liquor, and that kind of led to bank robbing, and I did not know anything about it till one night George called me to throw his bail. I went down to the jailhouse and I could not believe it. All this time I thought he'd been out in the streets selling insurance. Well, I had 2 little boys and wasn't any choice but for me to file for divorce after 6 years of marriage. Well, then George married some old battle axe named Catherine. She's the one that gave him the nickname Machine Gun. She taught him how to shoot walnuts off a picket fence with a Thompson submachine gun. They went around robbing banks and doing stuff, and then they got the bright idea to kidnap this millionaire oil tycoon and demand $200,000 in ransom money, which is about $4 million in today's money. They hid the guy at her parents' house down in Texas, and ransom money was paid, and George and Catherine hid bits of it all over the South. But the man they released was able to give enough information where George and Catherine were tracked down, living right here in Memphis at a house that still stands you can drive by and see at 1408 Rayner Avenue. Early one morning when George was in the bathroom, the FBI busted in, and legend has it he's the one that coined the term G-men for government men. Raised his hands and said, "Don't shoot, G-men, you got me, G-men, you got me." Well, he was sentenced to life in prison, and he was such a meek and mild prisoner out in Leavenworth that the other inmates nicknamed him Pop Gun Kelly instead of Machine Gun. He died there on his birthday, 54 years old, and he's buried out that way. Meanwhile, with my 2 boys, I ended up right good for myself. I married a Rexall drugstore executive, and we lived happily ever after till I was 96 years old, buried here at Elmwood. You know, they never did find all of that ransom money buried around. Wonder if some of it's still around here.
Oh, hi there. I was born August 2nd, 1922, right here in Memphis, Tennessee, where I lived most of my life. My name is Ernest Withers. You may know me as a photojournalist. You know, my sister gave me my first Brownie camera when I was a kid. I took my first photo at Manassas High School, actually. The speaker was the wife of the famous champion boxer, Joe Louis, Miss Marva Trotter Lewis. They dared me to do it. And you know what? I walked up to that stage and I took that photo, and it was a great photo. At that point, I knew. I was the captain of my high school football team. My wife was the drum majorette, high school sweetheart at the time. I married her. Her name was Dorothy Curry. It was the year 1941, the same year World War II started, I graduated. And I enlisted in the Army, right here at Tullahoma in Tennessee. But I still had a bug for photography. I even convinced my leader to transfer me to Camp Sutton in Carolina. And then it was there I just learned more about the craft, you know, how to use dark rooms, the details of photography. Not having much formal training, I just wanted to do it. I would work with other soldiers and take pictures of them to send to their families, their sweethearts. I would trade my cigarettes, my beer, my rations, just for more photography material. And I made pretty good money at it. I would send money home to my family in canisters. But time went on, war went on. And I got back to Memphis, and my old daddy, he convinced me to take the Civil Service exam. And I became one of the first African-American police officers to be in a squad car. Most police officers walked the beat back then, but I was the first to, you know, have a car. And that was a privilege at the same time. But that didn't stop me. I kept taking pictures. Somehow, some way, I was just always blessed to be in the right moments at the right time. I was known worldwide as a photographer, and a civil rights historian. I was there for the boycotts in Montgomery. You know, I was there during the sanitation strikes here in Memphis. But it wasn't just a sad moment. You know, I was there to, you know, see the first black voters to register. I was there to capture the integration at Little Rock Central High School. I was there to see, you know, Dr. King speak. But again, going back to the sad points, I was also there to document his funeral, as well as Medgar Evers. I saw notables such as Mahalia Jackson perform. I captured presidents that visited this area, you know, Nixon, John F. Kennedy. I was there. I was always there. I live for this. I live for photography. It was in my blood. Again, just goes back to my childhood when my sister gave me that camera. I'm happy to be a part of Memphis history, and I'm buried right here at Elmwood Cemetery among friends. And again, the picture tells the story. My name is Ernest Withers. Thank you for visiting.
Hi, my name is Alma Theed, though most people know me by my nickname, Vance Avenue Alma. I used to hang out at the bars and brothels over on Vance Avenue. Let me tell you my story. When I was 17 years old, I married a no-good gambler named Halprin Cox. He ran a dice game over on Gayoso Avenue. Well, I got bored with him pretty quickly and divorced him and moved back home with Mama. A few years later, I met Roy Calvert. Roy worked for the railroad, and lot was he handsome. When he asked me to marry him and move to Little Rock, I did not hesitate to say yes. But life with Roy was wild. He drank all the time, and when he got to drinking, we got to fighting. One night, a few months after our marriage, he liked to haul off and hit me, so I shot him. And yes, I was arrested for murder, but when the jury heard about the beatings, they let me off as justifiable homicide, and I skedaddled out of Little Rock as fast as I could. Now back here in Memphis, my first husband, Halprin, started to sniff around again, and we got remarried in 1921. I was 26 years old and on my third marriage. But sadly, Halprin was killed in a car accident a few years later, and so I took the only job I could get, which was as a housemaid at a brothel. The money stunk, but what I made, I sent home to Mama. Well, a few years later, my luck started to change when I caught the eye of Michael McClavey. Now, Michael was not my typical kind of man, seeing as how he had a good job and made a good living. And really, he just wanted to treat me nice and buy me nice things. But he was 25 years older than me. Can you blame me for getting bored? And I did not mean to fall in love with Charles Miller. But Charles was fun and exciting. I did not know that Charles was going to shoot Michael. And then Charles was convicted of murder, I was convicted of accessory, and we were sentenced to 10 years in prison, where I worked in the prison laundry. Now, this is where I met my next husband, William Theed. William was in for murder also, and so he seemed more like my kind of guy. We were paroled in 1931 and married a few months later. We lived in a godforsaken shack off Brooks Road, raising chickens and pigs. We fought all the time, and William divorced me. Now get this, can you believe that he told the judge I threatened to kill him? The nerve. Well, anyway, after William moved out, Mama moved into the shanty with me, and we did the best we could. We needed some milk, so I stole a cow, and I was sentenced to 90 days in the county workhouse. When I got out, I met Ed Gill. Ed was a lumberman. Now, we got married shortly thereafter, and if you are keeping track, this is my 6th marriage. Now, sadly, on a cold, drizzly January morning, a sailor stumbled over Ed's cold, dead body not too far from the shanty. Now, because of my history, I was considered a suspect, but I swore I had nothing to do with it. But then they found my gun and the bullets in it matched the one in Ed's, so I was convicted of murder again and sentenced to 10 years in prison. I was paroled in 1955. Now, most women would have sworn off marriage by now, but not me. I met William Massey, and we were married in 1960. Lucky for him, that marriage ended in divorce. You know, here at Elmwood, there used to be a giant tree near the place where I'm buried. And I told the superintendent one time that if anything ever happened to that tree, I would just kill him. Well, I guess they took me seriously because whenever they worked in that area, they would have a lookout. And if I just wandered on the property, they would all scatter. I guess they were finally relieved when I was buried here in 1970. Now, before you go, I have one question for you. Are you married?
I'm Sheena Barnett, and I'm a volunteer here at Elmwood. I've been a volunteer at several events like Soul of the City and Cemetery Cinema, but this year I was looking for a different way to give back and something to sort of fill my time. Like probably a lot of you, I was impacted very much by the COVID-19 pandemic. My father died of the virus, and a week later I lost my job. And I spent much of the summer feeling very lost and very sad, not sure where to go or what to do. So I came here to Elmwood, and I would walk around the grounds and enjoy the beautiful views. And one day I asked Executive Director Kim Bearden, how can I give back? What can I do? And she suggested I start cleaning stones. And I started on July 1st, and as of today, I've cleaned over 130. Hopefully by the time you see this, I will have cleaned more than 150. That's my goal. And I absolutely love it. It has eased my mind and eased my soul. I come out here, I put on an audiobook, and it's just me and the beautiful weather, sometimes the hot weather, and the dearly departed. And I get to spend time thinking about what their lives were like and who they loved, who they hated, what they enjoyed doing, what they struggled with in life, and what were their successes in life as well. And it's such a wonderful experience to smell the moss and the dirt as it comes off of the grave, and to just think about how as the dirt washes away, I feel like my soul is being lifted. And I hope that wherever these folks are, I hope they feel a little bit lifted and loved too. So this is something that's very close to my heart, and I love doing it. There is nothing like coming out here to Elmwood and enjoying a peaceful afternoon, doing a bit of cleaning and spiffing up and giving some love to these old stones. And the guy that I'm beside right now, I call him my friend, Mr. James Kirkland. I've always loved this plot of land right here in Elmwood. I don't know why, but I've always loved it. So I decided to clean him up one day. I was cleaning him up in July, so it was very hot. In fact, I met a lot of cradle gardeners that day. They were out here tending to all of their plants because a heat wave was going on, so it was like 95 degrees out here. And as I'm sitting here working, I was actually right over here, I felt the coldest breeze. Cold, so cold. And all of a sudden, I'm just like, okay, if this was the normal temperature for today, I would have to be in a jacket. So I thought nothing much of it. It went back to being very hot, and I went home and I started learning more about Mr. Kirkland here. It turns out he was a really fascinating guy. He was a choir leader and a pillar of the community, someone who really wanted to give back to Memphis. And he was, I believe in June, I'll have to double check that, of 1882, he was working on a park here in Memphis. He wanted to have a park that could bring together everyone and they could all enjoy music there. And he actually suffered a sunstroke, and that's how he passed away. And I wonder if My Little Cold Breeze was his way of saying thank you for taking care of this beautiful monument that he has.
My name is Pam Rummage, and I love Elmwood. As an educator for 38 years, I have found that Elmwood has the most outstanding and the best outdoor classroom that you could ever find. The staff is fabulous here, and they've helped me do lessons with grades from pre-K through college level. I bring my students out usually in the fall and again in the springtime because there's so many opportunities for every subject you can imagine. Brought classes out here to learn about science and about the trees and the plants, but then we've done history studies and about famous Memphians. So Elmwood is an ideal place for educators to bring their students and learn not just about the people and places and events of Memphis, but to learn more about themselves and how fabulous it is to live here in Memphis. Personally, I've been a volunteer here at Elmwood for a number of years and come out for the events and the tours and help out with educational programs and tours during the summer. And it's just an exciting place to learn because there's always something great going on at Elmwood.
It's been a great experience putting this film together, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I also hope that we've shared some of your favorite Elmwood Cemetery stories and maybe some you haven't heard before.
Elmwood Cemetery is a nonprofit organization. Established in 1852, there are almost 80,000 individuals at rest beneath our giant shade trees. Elmwood is a place that reflects the love, history, sorrow, and even joy of the people of Memphis. It is a place that deserves special attention, care, and support.
If you've enjoyed the film, please donate to help Elmwood and its ongoing maintenance costs. No gift is too small, and every gift will be used to care for these majestic 80 acres.
There are several ways you can donate. The easiest is by texting the word GIVE to 901-446-1925.
If you prefer, you can visit our website at elmwoodcemetery.org. Just click the donate button.
From the Board of Trustees, staff, volunteers, families, and friends who care for this sacred space in Memphis, thank you for your donation and support of our historic Elmwood Cemetery.
Good night, friends.
Goodbye and Godspeed. I believe we will take our leave.